Hello, hi everyone. Welcome to the session. I'm very happy to welcome Arniban Chaudhary to this event. A little bit about our speaker. He's an award winning journalist, a senior broadcast producer with over 17 years of experience. The experience is in aviation, logistics, and global business for leading media outlets, including the Wall Street Journal, Dow Jones, and Economic Times. He is currently serving as the senior assistant editor at the Economics Time and also is the executive producer of The Morning Brief, one of India's top music podcasts. He has hosted over 700 episodes covering topics like business strategy, trade, data privacy, and climate change. He has also developed and host Corner Office Conversations, which is a series featuring exclusive interviews with the global CEOs from companies such as Siemens, Salesforce, Uber, Adobe, offering unique insights into leadership and global business trends. With deep expertise in storytelling, investigative audio journalism, and editorial strategy, he delivers sessions packed with real world insight that help students like you and young professionals explore some very interesting careers in podcasting. And today, the topic here is, like I already said, careers in podcasting, storytelling, and audio journalism. So, Anivan, over to you to just take these budding podcasters to through their journey. Thank you.
Hi, hi Anna. Thank you so much. Hi everyone. That was a very good introduction. Actually, I mean, I don't know if I deserve so much credit, but thank you so much, Anna, for all of those encouraging words of appreciation. Uh, just before I get into podcasting and journalism, which is what I'm going to present today. Let me give you a little bit of background on why I got into podcasting. I had done journalism for about 12 to 13 years when and I had kind of gotten bored with. Can you hear me properly?
Yes, Anirban, we can hear you.
Okay.
Fine.
So I'd gotten a little bored of just writing the same things, and I was constantly on the lookout for newer forms of storytelling, which is when podcasting sort of happened to me. The Morning Brief podcast, which is the Economic Times flagship show, is is a child of the pandemic. Actually, we started it during I think 2021, and I got into it a year later, and I got into it a year later, and within a year and a half of that, I became its executive producer, and I found my passion in this, which was, which was equivalent to, or if not more than writing. So I will share what I know about podcasting and journalism and storytelling today, and why this is the new voice of news. I'll stick to the basics of podcasting, so you can apply these tenets that I'm going to talk about in audio as well as video podcasting. Of course, in video podcasting, the scale and the production levels are very different. Audio podcasts are usually done on a very shoestring budget. Video podcasts are much more, elaborate and expansive and expensive also. But but we'll stick to the basic tenet so that you get a sense of how podcasting works, irrespective of medium, right? Okay, so what are podcasts, right? I'm sure a lot of you have heard or seen podcasts. There are a few very popular ones in India. Ranveer Alabadia is one. Raj Shamani is another. Of course, there are great news podcasts as well, um, that you must have heard. But I mean, just to get into a basic of what are podcasts, podcasts are recorded conversations distributed digitally. But then, if you just record two people in the street talking to each other, that may or may not be a podcast. In fact, most likely it wouldn't be a podcast, right? So uh, there are four qualities that I think make for what makes a conversation, what turns a conversation into a podcast. One is that it has to be really, really engaging. And by engaging, I mean that it has to hold your attention all the time, right? Um, Random conversation wouldn't do that. So podcasts are very smartly produced and scripted and designed to uh, to be engaging while sounding casual. If you go to a conversation, if you go to a podcast and think that this is just a casual conversation, don't be fooled. It's designed to be completely engaging every single minute. The second point is inclusive. You are listening to a conversation between, or you're watching a conversation between two people or one host and more people, but you have to feel that you are part of that room or that studio where the conversation is happening. Customized, of course, because there are so many kinds of podcasts now, and I will come to that customized bit in the next slide as well. I will revisit this point. Customized, so that you get from the podcast what you want, right? So, for example, there are so many kinds of podcasts today. There are tech podcasts, finance podcasts, geopolitics, news, history, sports, of course. And there are subdivisions as well. So in tech you have AI, of course. In geopolitics, you have local geopolitics. For example, Economist has something on just China, right? Or you have larger geopolitical shows as well. So it should be customized according to your need, and that is what makes a conversation a podcast. Personalized, of course, similar. uh, Personalized not just in the sense that there should be a personal connect for you, but also the fact that the host and the guest should have a personal connect to the podcast, and a sort of a personal currency that they are sort of making very clear to you when they do the podcast, right? So personalization, right? When a host is talking, he has to talk about his or her own experience. The guest has to talk about his or her own experience, about his or her own opinions. This is something you don't get in news outlets, but you'd get in a podcast, which is why it's different, and which is why it's the newer form of news. We'll come to that as well. Just a nugget, information nugget here: 67% of monthly podcast listeners are aged between 12 and 34. Okay, origin story. Very simple. I'll keep it very short. The word podcast came from, it's a portmanteau word, which is a combination of two words. It came from something called iPods and broadcast. iPods, when it was launched by Steve Jobs around, I think, 2006, the the redeeming feature of this, what differentiated it from other products in the market, was one, that it could store a lot more data, songs, etc., and two, that it was meant especially for podcasts. This is when podcasts became popular. The first podcast was, of course, much earlier. It was in the 80s. That was when it was first produced and shared with the world, but they became popular after iPods. Okay. Now, what is your podcast type? That is that is something which people are really interested in. Your podcast type, and which one do you want to listen to? I said that it's uh, customized to listener preferences and listener requirements. So you have to really understand what is your pod type. So the most popular one in the world is the interview. I'm not sure how many of you have listened to these, which I show you on the screen: the Joe Rogan Experience, What Now by Trevor Noah, and the Lex Friedman podcast. All of these are the most famous and the most acclaimed of interview shows in the world. Lex Friedman, I'm sure some of you have seen, because he got our Prime Minister Narendra Modi very recently. Joe Rogan, of course, whoever is interested in Elon Musk and what he likes to say, Elon Musk has actually shared a lot of news developments on the Joe Rogan podcast that he hasn't in interviews. That is the influence of it. Interviews can be of varied lengths. For example, Trevor Noah is usually about 40 minutes to 45 minutes. Joe Rogan, Lex Friedman are much longer. Joe Rogan is usually, I think, 2 to 3 hours, but Lex Friedman could stretch about 4.5 hours, which is also some of the podcasts which is also some of the episodes that Nikhil Kamath does. If you've seen some of his, if you've heard and seen some of his podcasts, his conversations are also pretty long, right? The other one is the narrative, which is one of them is something called, okay, the narrative podcast is actually when the host who's talking has a script that talks to you. Through the script, he talks to you throughout the podcast, and uh, that is interspersed with other voices, context, background, and it is designed very well with a lot of music and sound effects, etc. One of the first examples of it is something called Serial, which is a true crime podcast, and I must tell you that true crime podcasts still are extremely popular. In fact, they are as popular as interviews. They started as the most popular in the most popular genre in podcasting, but now they are at par with the interviews. But true crime podcasts are um, extremely popular and sought after. Serial was one. Then there is Empire, which is a mix of conversation and narrative. It's William Dalrymple who talks to a journalist, Anita Anand, about basically about empires, about the British Empire, Ottoman Empire, you know, and Roman, etc. Each episode is deals with one empire, and it's a mix of conversation and narrative. Radio Labs is one of my favorite narrative podcasts because it uses a lot of elements of sound. It deals with science and questions that simple questions that we ask in our day-to-day lives. Like what is one of my favorite episodes of theirs is what is baby talk. They did an entire episode on how to decipher baby talk. They spoke to doctors, etc. Then there is an episode on the God particle. There is an episode on animals. So Radio Labs is definitely, if you want to explore the world of sound and how well they are designed to appeal to you, I think you should definitely check out Radio Lab. News, of course, which is my forte. The Morning Brief, Economic Times, which I run. Then Wall Street Journal has this podcast called The Journal. BBC has Global News podcast, and the New York Times has something called The Daily. I'm not sure you can. Uh, okay, okay. Each of them are my favorites. Each of them are something you can listen to. Of course, the Financial Times has a very good podcast. Has multiple podcasts actually. New York Times also has multiple podcasts. Then you have the Economist, which I said I mentioned one of the podcasts, which is called the Drum Tower, which is entirely based on China geopolitics, but there are others as well. Um, the news podcast could be interviews, they could be conversations, and they could be narrative as well. The Journal is a brilliant mix of narrative and conversations. So there is a script, and there are interspersed with sometimes bites from multiple guests or multiple sources that they talk to. The Daily uh, is a pure play example of a news conversation, right? BBC again is a mix of the two, right? The Morning Brief, if I were to talk about my podcast, is also a mix of the two. If I wish I had the time to, I wish I had the time to play snippets of some of my episodes to you, but anyway, that's for another day, perhaps. Um, the Morning Brief is a mix of narrative and conversations. In fact, we go for narratives whenever there are we. How do I take that call, whether it's a narrative or a conversation? Sometimes it's just pure logistics. I don't have the time. I just go for one conversation, edit it, and just push it out. Uh, the other times, when I realize that this is a topic which requires a lot of context, a lot of scripting, a lot of sound design, I go for narrative. A good example, a good recent example of this, and there's an episode that did very, very well, is the Nepal crisis and how Gen Z's, overturned the government and, burned down the city, etc., and overnight the government changed, etc. So that was a narrative podcast, and because it required a lot of history, context, etc., but it also had conversations. Whereas if I were to do something on, say, Trump's latest round of tariffs on pharma, right, on medicines, he's raised it to 100% now. That would just be one conversation with perhaps one medical practitioner, maybe two conversations with our in-house pharma editor, perhaps, which a lot of news outlets do, by the way. They use a lot of their internal resources, and one perhaps a medical practitioner or a pharma CEO, uh, most likely a pharma CEO. So that's how we sort of decide. But the the core idea behind an episode is always the news cycle. You know, we look at, and I'm sure others look at, what is the news uh, that warrants a conversation or an episode of 25 minutes. Not every topic lends itself to a 25-minute episode, right? And it's a trial and error always. We've had episodes which are not successful. We stretched it to 20 minutes, but the topic didn't really warrant such a detailed discussion, so the episode didn't do well. So that's always a trial and error. But we two things: we try to stick to the news cycle, and we try to choose topics that lend themselves to longer conversations, okay, which have longer shelf lives in the popular consciousness, right? Okay. Now, why podcasts are the new newsrooms? Now, I'm concentrating the discussion to my expertise, which is why this form of storytelling sometimes trumps others in terms of popularity, in terms of reach, right? So, one is, of course, trust deficit in traditional media. I think it's very, very clear that news outlets these days, a lot of news outlets have their own agenda, be it political, corporate, etc. And it's uh, it's not, there is a huge trust deficit in terms of the kind of fact checking that they do, or the kind of agenda that they have. Are they being entirely objective? A lot of news outlets in India, and of course in the West, are not entirely objective. Neither are they neither do they have the news, the consumer, always in mind. They have other agendas. So that's one reason. A huge reason is the mobile first Gen Z and millennials. They don't always have the time to sit down and read newspapers or look at the TV and listen to the screaming on news channels that pass as interviews. So they want they kind of go for the more sort of, one, for the more in-depth sort of analysis in the form of conversations. Two, something that they can listen to or consume on their way to work, or on while they're doing other things. So interestingly, you will see that even if there are video podcasts, a lot of people listen to them. I mean, they'll just look at the screen once. If there is a interesting reaction or laughter, for instance, then they will probably look at the screen, but otherwise they're listening to it. So podcasts are consumed when you're doing other stuff, when you're driving, when you're jogging, sometimes when you're cooking, etc. So that helps the Gen Z and millennials very well. This is a multitasking generation. We are in times of multitasking. That is where podcasts click. Platform democratization, of course. You don't have to go, Spotify, etc. Spotify and YouTube have made it possible for almost everyone to start a podcast, anyone and everyone, which is not the case with televised news or with newspapers. That democratization is a good and bad thing. You have a lot of clutter as well that passes in the name of podcast, but you have some brilliant products that are not from, say, that are not from renowned or established outlets, but from independent practitioners, but they are amazing, right? News fatigue, quite similar to trust deficit. Uh, Additionally, I mean, the headline bombarding has really got to people's patience now. They don't want that. They want to take up one topic. They want to know about it in depth. They don't want the ticker kind of a news bombarding that often is done by news channels. I'm sorry. There's someone at the door. I'll just take 30 seconds. I'm sorry. Sorry about that. Okay. Uh, so so news fatigue is my final point. You also don't want to be straitjacketed that you sometimes feel in a newspaper. You're reading 500 words on something that you want to know much more about. So what do you turn to? TV is not the answer. You turn to a podcast. Okay. Um, okay. Let's get into, for those of you who are interested in in making a podcast. Intro, main body, outro. I'll spend very little time on this. Intro is how you present the topic and uh, and tease the listener or the viewer into the main body. What is the main body? It could be, like I said, it could be a narrative structure. The main body is when you discuss or deal with the topic threadbare, either through conversations or narrative, etc. Um, and outro is your closing comments. Intro is usually uh, the most important part in which we have to spend a lot of time, because this is where, in a world of, in an era of limited attention span, this is where we have to sort of really tease a consumer, the listener or the viewer in. Okay, so you could do it by, in a lot of ways. You could summarize smartly what you're going to discuss. You could end the intro with a few questions, that which is what I normally do, with a few questions that the episode will deal with. You could play, when it's a video podcast, you could play a montage of the most interesting quotes. The main body uh, should be expansive and should be sort of detailed, but it also should be very well edited. The outro should always be short. It's your stamp to the podcast. It's your takeaways. Usually it's what you think. It's the conclusion that you give to the viewer or the listener. Many podcasters do away with it, but I prefer to, I sort of prefer to have it, so that the listener, this is intro and the outro are the times when I'm speaking to the listener directly, and I think that's very impactful. Okay, tools to, again, uh, I'll just flip through it. Tools, and this is, I'm sticking to audio podcast here, because video podcast is a whole plethora of tools, and it's very complicated. Of course, I mean, it could be simple as well. I mean, video podcast can be your Zoom calls, right? This that if it was a two-way kind of thing, if I was talking to Adil or Arna, if it was a two-way thing, this could have become a podcast as well, a podcast on podcasts, if you will. But then, to make a good video podcast, it's quite, it's 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 nuanced. It's a little complex, and it's a little expensive as well. On the other hand, audio podcasts are very simple to do. You need, in terms of equipment, you need a mic, a good mic. This is what, the one that you see on the screen is what we use. The software that you can do it on, that you conduct interviews on, or even your VOs or voiceovers or scripting, you could use Zencaster, which is actually the most popular. Riverside, which is a higher end sort of software, but it's very good. And the one we use is StreamYard, which is also pretty good. This works. These softwares work like your Zoom calls, right? The only difference is that, since these are for podcasts, since these are for audio and video podcasts, they take care to filter out other kind of ambient noise. so you get a better quality recording than you would on a Zoom call or a Google Meet or whatever you have. Yeah, Descript is something that's an absolute genius tool. It works like Descript is something that works like Microsoft Word, but when you edit the words, when you edit the text, the sound also gets edited. So there is a sorry, I wish I could show you something. Uh, so in fact, I don't think I can because I'm not sharing that screen. Anyway, Descript is on top of the screen. You have your text, which is the transcript of the interview, and below that you have sound waves, which is the interview tape, right? So uh, as you strike through stuff or delete stuff, the sound waves also get deleted, and that's a very nice way of editing. Descript is our backbone, and it is the backbone of a lot of extremely acclaimed podcasts around the world. There is a podcast called, if you're interested in global M&A, global deals, etc. There is a podcast called Acquired that you should listen to. It's also like a long form sort of a thing, 4 hours, but they go deep into one company and its history, etc. They use Descript quite a lot. Okay. Hosting, and this also helps in monetizing a podcast. We don't use either of them, but Buzzsprout, Acast, Transistor are good platforms for that. And of course, your platforms where you present the podcast, where you broadcast them, where you share them. Apple, YouTube, which has quietly become the biggest podcast platform in the world now, and of course Spotify. Then there is Amazon Music, etc. The Morning Brief is of course available on all of them. Okay, skill sets. What kind of skill sets do you need? Choose the topic that you're passionate about. I think this slide is pretty self-explanatory. If you go through it, you'll be able to understand what I'm saying. Interviewing, conversation, like I said, conversational but not casual. It should be seemingly casual but designed to engage as much as possible. Fast-paced yet insightful. Fast-paced is something that's becoming more and more popular now. Inviting and not probing. When you talk to a person, don't behave like a news journalist. But I mean, we can't behave like a news journalist, but I mean, we will be asking the tough questions, but not in a way that a TV news journalist asks, right? We have to be very, otherwise it puts off the listener, you know, because they are, I told you about news fatigue, I told you about, trust deficit and all. You have to take care of all that. You have to constantly, in your conversation, you have to constantly differentiate between what you are and what you are not. Okay. Scripting, voice modulation. Scripting is of course very important. Like I said, the intro, if it's a narrative thing, if it's a narrative podcast, scripting is just extremely important. Voice modulation, yes. That of course comes with practice, but there's a different kind of voice modulation that you have, which is very different from say TV, etc., which is evocative, which is personal, which is friendly, which is calm. Uh, that kind of a voice modulation works very well. Visual sound design. This is especially important in narrative podcasts. Like I said, how you design the entire thing through sound. And I give you the example of Radio Labs. That works very well. Editing, extremely important. The litmus test for it is your attention span is the audience's attention span. So if you listen to your own podcast and you see, if you find your attention drifting, that is the time to edit. Promotion, of course, very important. I mean, what works in this day and age without promotion? Your SEOs, um, um, your social media outreach, and of course little things like your thumbnails, your descriptions, your descriptors, your blurbs. You have to take care of all that while doing promotion, and this is especially important because, like I said, it's a democratized platform, right? You don't have to be part of an established news outlet. You can promote your own stuff, and it's easier now, and good content will find a way to reach people, right? Okay. AI, huge impact on podcasts right now. The most popular right now, and also extremely popular in India, is 11 Labs, which is a voice regenerator, which we use a lot, by the way. Whenever we have to have voiceovers, sorry, for example, if you've interviewed someone in Hindi, he couldn't speak in English, so uh, the voice that we use in English under that 11 Labs is a great is a great option. Their Indian voices aren't so good yet, but they're sort of getting there. They're training Indian voices. That Autopod, which is I think part of I think it's part of the Adobe suite. This is a video editor. It's very good, getting better. These are two of the AI tools that you can definitely use and which are used um, very frequently. Um, the others are something called HeyGen, which a lot of people use to create their own avatars. And of course, to create video podcasts, you have amazing tools like Midjourney, like Sora, etc., which you can through which you can create short videos or a set of short videos which can accompany you know your explainers or short podcasts. So that's another thing that you can do. Can we have an AI generated podcast? Yes, Notebook LLM gives you that. You just if you're reading something, for instance, and you don't have the patience or the time to read it, you want to turn it into a podcast, go to Notebook LLM, put up just upload that script or the text, which could be a newspaper article. Just upload the entire newspaper if you want, and just tell new Notebook LLM to give you like a 5 minute sort of a podcast on it. You have two conversational voices which are very simply, they explain the whole thing to you. It's not always so nuanced and so deep as what you would gain by if you read it, or what you would gain through an organic podcast, not an AI generated one. But it's useful, if you want to cut short on time, etc. I know many people who upload books and turn it into a long podcast and listen to it on their way, and it's a discussion. It's not, the book is not read out verbatim, it's a discussion, right? Monetization, like I said, very important and very possible, though not very easy. It's a hugely, I wouldn't say cluttered, but it's a hugely populated space because of that democratization. And not all of them are good, but some of them that are not good also get monetization because of some hacks. So it's not, it's a little, the vagaries are a little complex, but it's not impossible. Sponsorship slash ads, subscription models, of course, where people subscribe to your podcast and pay for it. But that is once you've become big, of course. Branded collabs, the ones that are mostly used in India, mostly with finance instruments and companies. For example, mutual funds companies have a lot of podcasts that they collaborate with. Crowdfunding, of course, is something that a lot of podcasts in the West do. The platforms for that are Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee. Buy Me a Coffee is actually pretty famous. A lot of very famous, very good podcasts in the West use Buy Me a Coffee, where you can just like on YouTube, you can you can contribute via comments, or you have some sort of mechanism to do it. Buy Me a Coffee is the same. If any of you want to start a podcast, this is definitely a good way to monetize it if you're not getting sponsorships, branded collabs, and subscription models. Challenges, like I said, it's a hugely populated space, so discoverability, attention retention, because attention spans are they're getting shorter and shorter every day, every week, and there is a lot of clutter of information and content out there on the internet. So uh, retaining uh, retaining the attention of a listener during a podcast and retaining that listener throughout other podcasts are both challenging. Platform dependence, yes, sometimes. You ultimately have to depend on a Spotify or a YouTube, and it's many rules for your podcast to gain acceptance and to gain traction. And there are monetization limits, which I dealt with in the last one, right? But I don't think the challenges, I mean, there are challenges, of course, but the joy, if you ask me, the joy of just being able to share stories with the world through podcasts, I think is unparalleled. And I would be glad if, if one or two of you started your own podcasts. I'd be glad, and I think this is a fruitful conversation. So let's pod. Thank you.
Thank you, Anirban. The session was really very insightful, and we received more than 100 questions regarding podcasting and storytelling. But
Hmm.
through your presentation, you have already answered most of them. So we'll be picking the top 5 to 6 questions, and we would request you so that you answer them. Goes well?
Sure.
Yeah.
Bring me
So,
on.
yeah. So now many students today are also thinking about building their personal brand. So, what are your views on how can young professionals use podcasting or in general content creation to stand out and build their credibility in their careers?
I've sort of dealt with it a little in my presentation, but um, so first of all, I think you have to have a credible career first of all to build a brand. It's not like if you don't have something to back it up already, just a podcast would build your brand. Either a career or or knowledge or something to talk about. Only then, once you get into a podcast and do your own self branding, I think would it matter. There is uh, a guy, No Shave or Shaving, the Shaving Company, I think, whose founder has a great podcast. So I can only give his example. There are two things that work from him for him. One is he's brilliant. He's built a solid company, and the other is he's a great conversationalist. So when he talks to people, he really knows how to ask questions and intersperse with his own experience. The other bigger example is, of course, Nikhil Kamath, right? Not many people knew Nikhil Kamath before. Not many lay people knew Nikhil Kamath before his podcast, but once it came, and because he puts in so much of himself and his knowledge, not just in how he speaks, but also the kind of questions he asks, that people are intelligent enough to understand that this guy is a brand, right? And he gets great people and they open up to him. So they realize that this guy deserves to be heard, deserves to be seen. And that's how the personal branding sort of evolves. So I think there is no straight answer to this. Something to back it up, information, knowledge that you have, and a good conversation. I think a combination of all these would help.
Sure, Arman, that was insightful. Now, moving on to the second one. You have been behind some of India's most successful podcasts. It is from your personal experience. Can you please share a behind the scenes story, from example, from the morning brief that shaped your approach towards storytelling or changed the way you think about audio? Any of your personal story or a personal snippet from your life?
Okay. So many, man. Any all the narratives that I do give me new perspective about audio storytelling. So one recent example that I can give is when pollution was at its peak in Delhi in the last year, and I mean I think every year actually. So we did an episode, and I mean the normal episode would have been just to speak to a few experts, etc., and get stuff on, the usual answers on stubble burning, sorry, and what is the government doing. But we decided to start the podcast with a mix of children's voices and old people's voices. What children think about the pollution in Delhi, and how they see it, just uh, uh, through just what they perceive, the smoke, the fact that they can't see their own hands sometimes, the fact that they don't like to cough all the time, and then the senior citizens who say that Delhi is not what it used to be. I mean, the fact that I can't see my own hands, I've never faced this. I don't want to. They say I don't want to stay in Delhi. So that was a good. So that told me about, and it was, I mean, it would have been impactful had I done it on text as well, but I think it was infinitely more impactful when people actually heard their voices. And that's how I started the episode. And then of course I went in depth into spoke to a lot of experts, etc. The other one is something I did on the tiger economy once, and I started the episode by with a montage of people describing how it feels to see a tiger, you know, and great music, etc. So that was one of the popular episodes, and I think that's where audio storytelling uh, really sort of told me that yeah, this is brilliant.
Thanks, Anirban. Now, the next question is, like, how do you see podcasting evolving in India compared to the global trends? Like, what are the patterns we are seeing, or are we catching up, or are we creating our own space in the podcasting
Hmm.
sector?
Yeah, that's a
What
good
are
question.
yeah,
Yeah,
what are
that's
your views on that?
yeah, that's a very good question because we deal with this question on a daily basis as podcasters ourselves. So first, the West had seen a podcasting boom in the last 3 or 4 years. That boom has now tapered down to quite an extent, in the sense that we saw companies like Spotify overspending and overprojecting the growth of podcasts and going into losses because of that. Because that boom has now, like I said, tapered off, but still, podcasting is very, very big now, especially um, with a lot of uh, especially with a lot of stuff to talk about now, right? And especially geopolitics, the kind of stuff that Trump is doing. So podcasting is big again in the West, but it's off its boom. In India, audio podcast hasn't really caught on to that extent. It's still very, very niche. We are happy to be in that niche space because we are part of a news outlet. But for independent podcasters, getting into audio podcasting would be a risk. So my suggestion: video podcasts are big in India because we like to see things. Even when we are listening to songs, we are not just listening to songs. We want to watch that video, which is why people go to YouTube for songs and not to Spotify, right? Or Amazon Music or Ghana or whatever, what have you. So video podcast, like I said, it can be costly, it can be expensive, but it can also be cheap. If you have great content, but you are just doing it through a Zoom call, that can work as well. But and we do that all the time. We have Zoom call, we have StreamYard videos, which is like this, which is two windows, me as the host and the other one. In fact, we did one very recently. We did a very big interview, which will come on Monday, so I can't sort of talk about it. But we did it that way. We did it through a video conference, and I'm sure that will work better than the audio one because video podcasts are big in India. So if somebody wants to start a podcast, I'd suggest start with video.
Yeah, so we are looking forward for the Monday podcast as well. And Anirban, there is this one question we repeatedly are getting. It is regarding the career roles students are looking forward. So many people think that podcasting is only about being a host, but we through your session we know that there is more to it. What are the some other roles, other career roles in podcasting, like in production, editing, or research, which the fresher audience could explore? Like your take on.
Not in India. Not in India. In the West, it's a thriving career. Even researchers get paid very well. Producers, of course. In India, yeah, I mean there are podcast production companies which are again. I'm coming to the same thing. It's again video podcasts that are doing extremely well. That are doing extremely well because there are very few video podcasts that are not monetized, right? They are very easily monetizable if you do well, if you have great content. So if you want to join a video podcast team, a producer there or a DOP there, or even somebody who starts a company producing podcasts, and I know some of my colleagues have done that, they can do extremely well because that is a space that is not too full of players now in India, not too full, and they're doing extremely well. So Owlet is one. Um, Owled, sorry. That's a podcast production company. That's a video production company actually, which does a lot of podcasts. It has also produced Nikhil Kamat's podcast, some of it. One Hand Clap Productions. I think that it's the founders are former guys at AIB, the Tanmay Bhatt wala company, which came into controversy but now has done very well. So One Hand Clap is doing extremely well. It's doing one of the some of the most high end video podcasts in India. So video podcasts, yes, there are a lot of roles outside of hosting, which won't build a brand for you, by the way, but it can pay you well. If you want self branding, then you have to be in front of the camera or in front of the mic, right? Audio podcast, mm, very niche, very niche.
Okay, and this is the last one for this session, and it's coming from your answer as well. How can storytelling and podcasting skills benefit freshers? Like, if they don't want to build a career in media, like if they want to go in business, tech, or marketing roles, how can the storytelling and the podcasting skills benefit them in that field?
I mean, everything is storytelling now, right? All brands are stories, right? I mean, whether it's not just it, it's not just through podcasts. I mean, the podcast, there are two sides to a podcast, right? One, it's a storytelling tool, but it's also a huge branding tool. So the all brands, whether it's a company or an individual, wants to tell their stories, and what makes that brand and what makes the brand click, and what are the challenges that they had to face, etc., in depth. So I think podcasting uh, would help you tell the story of your brand much better, even if you don't want to get into media. And that will help you immensely when you're telling that same story to, say, an investor, the people at large, your consumer. I think podcasting is a brilliant, not just stepping stone, but also a tool to do that, not just initially, but throughout the life of your brand. So whether or not you decide a career in media, and many podcasters don't have a career in media. They are podcasters because they want to tell their own stories or the stories of their own brands. So I think it's great storytelling for brand building.
Correct, Anirban. So, thank you so much for those rich snippets and the real world perspective that you gave. This session
Thank you.
has actually given us a very deeper understanding of not just the podcasting industry, but also how storytelling can be a powerful tool across any career path. And to our students that have joined the session, I hope you are leaving today with many fresh ideas, practical tips, and maybe even the inspiration to start your own podcasts. And on behalf
I
of
hope so
Naukri,
too.
yeah, please, Nibang, go ahead.
No, no, I'm saying I hope so too. I hope some of them at least start their own podcasts. I'd be happy to know this.
Yeah, and on behalf of Naukri campus, I'd like to thank Anirban also for joining us and sharing his expertise. And thank you all for being such an engaged and conversational audience. Over
Thank you,
to you.
Arna, Adil, Nokri. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you. It was lovely.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks, Anirban. And students, if you want, you can connect with Anirban on his LinkedIn as well. You can reach out to him on his LinkedIn. His LinkedIn is Anirban Chaudhary. And any closing statements, Anirban, you want to have?
No, I'm just happy to have this opportunity. This is probably my eighth sort of such session, and it's always very rewarding to see how people are engaged, the kind of very sharp questions that they had, and I hope, like I said, I'm just repeating this for the third time. I hope at least one or two of you start your own podcast. That would be the biggest reward for me from the session. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks, Anirban. Thanks all who have joined this session.